All right, well, welcome everybody. This is our first in a series called the ICT Educator Webinar Series. And we kind of had this idea that when I was looking at my budget, I was thinking about how much it costs to put on a conference and, getting everybody there. And of course, a lot of people can't make it to the conference. And we have some wonderful panel presentations and great things. And even if you videotape those things and put them up on a website later on, people don't necessarily see them. So in the interest of just kind of appealing to the wide audience, that is the community college system, as well as others that wish to join us, we thought that we'll put on a weekly, at the same time, same number, ICT Educator webinar series. And we would have speakers the same quality that we would expect in terms of having a conference, keynotes, and panels, and that sort of thing. Except you don't need to go anywhere and you don't need to travel anywhere. You can, and so we're going to be looking at that quality, and we'll be asking everybody here who's participating to give us ideas. What would you like to hear? And so this is the first, and if Peter shows up, we'll actually have our first presentation. That'd be something. I hope he's all right. And then, of course, Peter's been the digital badge review team started. I was looking back at my notes back in 2014. For lack of just anything else happening, we'd heard about digital badges, so we just decided, well, let's put out the word and see who in the community college system is doing anything with digital badges. And not knowing if the chancellor's office or anybody in any position would eventually create a policy, we decided to just create an interest group. We called it the Digital Badge Review Team. And we met rather frequently in the beginning, around 2014, 2015, about quarterly, and just shared what everybody's doing, kept notes on it. And I'm not really sure what happened. I'm not sure if it got boring or what, but we kind of laid off for a while, and people started doing their projects. It was pretty much the same people every day, every time, giving us the same updates on the same projects. So they were working on them, and a lot of things have come to fruition, and a lot of us know a lot more about digital badges now than we did before. And I see Pete is on now. In the beginning, when I was learning about digital badges, I encountered Pete Janzow, at the time was with Pearson Acclaim, and I'll let him explain how Pearson Acclaim became part of Credly. But all I know is he had a pretty nice title before, and now he's a vice president, so I'm pretty sure he's happy about things. And he's gonna take us through just a general walkthrough of digital badges and how they've changed and who's using them. They have a pretty expansive platform. Now, I think it's important to point out that we are, as far as community college system is concerned, we're platform agnostic. I don't have any governance role at all in digital badges or how they should be used or anything else. This is purely an exercise in sharing amongst those of us who work at the community college system or experts from the outside, and that's what we're doing. And so today we're going to have a two-part presentation. First with Peter giving us an update on the Credly platform and the kind of customers they're getting and what he sees happening in the education space. And then John Makovich from College of the Canyons is going to be talking about kind of the in-depth, the nuts and bolts of what it's like to implement on campus. And we're not talking about one of those situations where you just say, oh, let's do a digital badge. We're talking about a situation where you involve the academic senate and everybody else, and you say what's really going to work for you, what's good long term. And we all know how scary that is, but John has had the courage to go out there and face that animal, and he's going to tell us all about it. And so you'll have some useful tools if you want to do that on your campus as well. So at this point in time, I'd like to turn it over to Peter Janzow to take the screen and tell us about digital badges from the Credly point of view. Thank you, Peter.
All right, thanks. Can everybody see the presentation? Look okay? See some nods? Excellent.
I can see it.
Okay, so I'm Pete Janzow. I was one of the co-founders of the Acclaim initiative, which was incubated at Pearson, and we spun out last April and merged with Credly. Between the two of us, our platforms were the two leading platforms. So we came together, and we've been able to take advantage of a lot of great momentum. So we're now in almost all the countries in the world, issuing badges at about 1 per second. and 12 of the top 13 IT credentials or technology credentials are represented in digital badge form, and that's really quite an accomplishment. So I wanted to start by giving you a quick update on where the ecosystem is and where we've come to. We've got tens of millions of credentials. We've got millions of learners now who've been recognized with a digital badge. We're using that digital badge to tell their professional story. And really with that critical mass and the entry of, well, these are three of the latest, CompTIA, Project Management Institute, and the Girl Scouts. We've got quite the thriving ecosystem. So this is the obligatory logos slide, but you can see lots of familiar logos. And frankly, there are, oh gosh, I don't know, half a dozen community colleges in California, a growing number of others, but literally thousands of higher ed institutions, hundreds of big brands, and hundreds of associations and professional organizations.
Pete, are your slides advancing? I'm still on the initial slide.
Oh, I wonder.
Anybody else still on the initial slide? Yeah, because when you said multiple logos, I was looking down there, slide number 5 on the side.
Yeah. So you're not seeing the slides advance, Steve?
No, I'm not. I'm maybe you picked the wrong window. I don't know, but I'm not seeing them advance.
All right. Is that better?
Give it a second. Sometimes there's a lag. I mean, I can see the little ones on the side, so I've been kind of following along, but I want to see all those.
Hang on. Let me just unshare and try and share it again.
Okay.
I'm trying to share this specific app, but if that fails, we can always go to the full screen mode. Okay, I got a little green box around it now.
Okay, I see the girls. We're on the Girl Scout slide. I see the 195 country. Okay, it's moving. It's moving.
Okay, good. Hopefully we got it operational now, and I apologize for that little technical malfunction. Again, these are 3 of the more recent groups to come on board. And this is the snapshot of some of the logos involved in the digital badge movement. Increasingly, we're finding the word badge going out of vogue, and people are using digital credential instead. So we've begun to kind of repitch things. We're a digital credential platform that supports the open badge format for transparency and interoperability. And that's, you know, if you're thinking about how you present this to your administrators or others, other external stakeholders, that might be another way to frame it. But really what's happening is there's an awful lot of change going on in the education and employment landscape. And this is the trend that we're really plugging into with these portable digital verified achievements in the form of these digital badges. It seems like every day you can turn a page and see something new about a millennial engagement in the workforce, or the rise of the freelance economy, or a lack of trust and fraud in people's resumes and employment. And really we're finding digital credentials are a solution in all of those cases, and gathering a body of data that helps to make a pretty compelling business case if you're arguing for an investment for your credentials and your learning outcomes in your programs. In fact, I was at a conference last week with IBM, and they revealed some new data they've tracked. Oftentimes you'll hear in a corporate setting, if we invest in our workers by training them, they're going to leave. They're going to take that investment, they're going to go elsewhere. And IBM's data actually shows now that people who earn digital badges are quite a bit more likely to stay, to be engaged, and to advance in their careers because they're upskilling themselves. So I think they're going to be publishing some stuff on that coming up in the next couple of months, and we're excited about that. But I wanted to share that because the data is beginning to flow in. So rather than really dwell on the kind of where we've come from and where we are today, I thought we'd spend a little time talking about where we're going and some of the new things that are emerging. So again, we've got tens of millions of credentials and millions of learners who've been recognized with these. We've reached that critical mass, that tipping point. And the question is, so what? What can I do with this digital credential? If I earned it in my job, or I earned it in a professional setting, what can I do with this digital credential that advanced me towards a college degree? Or if I've earned a college credit, I've earned some college badge, how can I apply that on my professional journey? How can I help that to unlock a job or a further opportunity for me? So this is an example, IBM and Northeastern collaborating so that Northeastern evaluates IBM training badges and gives college credit for them. They accelerate the pathway for learners who've earned particular badges, project management, big data, these kinds of areas, map them into Northeastern programs, undergraduate and graduate degree programs. And they actually say, congratulations, you've just earned this recognition. Did you know you can apply that at Northeastern and get 6 or 12 units of credit? That you can accelerate your completion by 6 months, or you can save $5,000 or $6,000 in tuition. And we think this is a really exciting story. We've begun to work with the American Council on Education and Lumina Foundation to try and make this more of a standard approach so colleges can access professional learners and serve their needs more effectively. Here are a couple of other examples, right? Cal State Fullerton actually has a self-service portal for its students, and they reference a whole bunch of different kinds of badges. This is from a talk I gave last week with IBM, so it references the IBM badges, but you'll see on the same Cal State Fullerton page references to other professional credentials, Adobe or Project Management Institute, Microsoft, etc. And those are intended to be co-curricular pathways for their learners. So you graduate not just with a Cal State Fullerton degree, but also with professional badges, professional certificates, professional recognition. And then secondly, this other one, this Wake Tech Community College Accelerator, is one that actually is open to you as well. I talked with my contact at IBM yesterday, and he said, if you're interested in joining this program, you should just reach out through me and I'll connect you. Basically, IBM has a curricula that they've created. This one is around blockchain, but it covers several other areas. They call it New Collar Jobs. You've probably seen some press on it if you're following the Job Ready kind of skills training press. But New Collar Jobs is a program that can be a college alternative pathway, or it can be a pathway within colleges, a certificate program. It's even being considered in credit programs. In fact, this Wake Tech adoption is an example of where they're teaching blockchain as part of their IT curriculum. So you're getting an associate's degree in technology, but you're also earning IBM Wake Tech blockchain badges. And that sort of collaboration is really beginning to accelerate. In fact, excuse me, we're working with Autodesk. Sorry, I got a frog in my throat there. We're working with Autodesk, we're working with Apple, Microsoft on similar kinds of programs. So again, if collaboration with your college and those brands seems like an interesting idea, reach out to me and I'm happy to connect you up. Generally speaking, these programs involve some curriculum that the branded companies have produced that's adoptable by your college. You can put it into a credit or a non-credit pathway, your choice. And when you confer the credential that comes out at the end, it tends to be co-branded, like these Wake Tech and IBM branded badges. And that's nice because your learners get something from the college and they also get some recognition from a well-recognized technology company. I wanted to share a couple of other examples. The first is a program coming from the UK, where a company called TinSmart Social is launching this DigiSheds Smart Skills Engine program, which is an upskilling program for disadvantaged youth who are underemployed or unemployed, ages 18 to 25. And they're basically boot camping them to get them into an employment situation, and then talking with local colleges about how to take them from that first employment experience into a college pathway. And again, if you're interested in learning more about this boot camp approach with TinSmart or DigiSheds, I can connect you up. And there's, I think, some really interesting things going on here. They've got some really interesting public-private funding models that they've been able to put in place. And there may be some parallels for serving the populations that you serve. And then let's see, I have to switch over to a browser now. Here we go. The last example I wanted to provide is this EY recruiting video. So, you know, we think about badges as being kind of experimental, but several of the world's big brands are all in on it. And organizations like EY are even using it to recruit new entry-level employees. So let's see. Are you able to see it if I push it to full screen like this?
Yes, looks good.
Okay. Okay.
That's pretty amazing,
A
Pete.
little juice there, huh, Steve?
Well, you know, I get nervous when I see that kind of stuff. One is it's like we're going to get blown away if we don't catch up and figure out how to play in this space. But the other thing that always nags me about these badge questions, and if you don't mind answering this as you go along, is that how do industries confer value on these things? I mean, DigiSheds, I've never heard of them. This other one, EY, I never heard of them. I mean, how do you see that them intruding into the headspace of businesses such that their skill sets and their badges are valued?
Yeah. So I think a lot of it comes down to the value of brand and what you're building. And brand is built through collaboration as well. So the DigiSheds example, they're using the IBM New Collar Jobs curriculum to power some of their digital skills curriculum. They're partnering up with trade unions in the UK for the tracks that have to do with training for trade skills. And they're building from the ground up a program to serve disadvantaged or underemployed youth who are already kind of off the grid. So those youth don't necessarily have any awareness, but they see these big brands behind it that they recognize, and they're like, oh, that's a pathway I could get behind. And then oftentimes it has to do with building the grassroots support of local employers and regional employers. So another key part of the DigiSheds initiative is engaging with local mayors in the big cities in the UK and funding this as a community economic development project that involves education but has a very pointed skills and outcomes emphasis. Frankly, I don't think their mission is very different from what community colleges do. The best community colleges engage with the local employers. They talk about skills and skills gaps. They talk about underemployed and unutilized talent in the economy and in local economy. And then they put programs together to try and serve the needs of those people. But I'd say, the value begins with brand, and then it extends to the more formal education type things like the quality of the learning design, the quality of the assessment, the validation in the community with the employers, so that it's a full feedback loop that's going on. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and if some of our viewers are not familiar with how a badge functions, when the badge appears on your LinkedIn profile, you might want to go into this for a second. A person can click on it, and there's all your verified skill sets there. So it's not just an empty promise.
Yeah, and thanks for reminding me. I tend to think we're all sort of veterans of the badge age, but let me show you quickly what badges look like on a profile. Well, first, maybe we'll look at Twitter. If you're just exploring this for the first time, you can go out on Twitter and search for this phrase, view my verified achievement, and you will see a constant flow of professional badges, people who are using badges to promote their professional learning. It can be anything from professional certifications to learning from colleges that's related to things that can help people tell their professional story. Generally, when you use this Twitter search technique, You will find lots of technology badges because the tech community is very badge centric, but also things like this, right? Registered diagnostic cardiac sonographer. So this is a new sonography curriculum that's being represented by a professional association. Or if we go down a little bit further, right here, this is Esri, a California company. They're based in the San Diego area, GIS, and they've got training and certification badges, or things as diverse as nutrition. Let's see, I saw something on here yesterday that was kind of interesting. Let's see if we scroll down, we'll find it probably. Yeah, here's somebody who's being trained by Symantec and being a sales expert. Change management, right? So the range of things people are getting recognition for has really exploded. And of course, you do see lots of Microsoft and Cisco and VMware and CompTIA. Here's PwC, the big consulting firm, right? Or employee benefits. It's a real variety of things that you're going to encounter. I'm trying to get to the one I saw yesterday that was a typing certification that's being issued now out of an education provider in the UK. And I thought, well, you know, typing was one of those gateway skills for me when I was coming up. In any case, yeah, here you go, touch typing, right? They all operate the same way. Wherever you share them, they come back to the platform. Whatever the open badge provider is, verifies that, so you can click to verify it. And it provides a set of standardized information, right? And then, as Steve was describing, everybody gets their own profile, so I'll sign into my profile. And the vision for that profile is that you collect all your badges for different kinds of learning experiences, different kinds of recognition, different kinds of achievements. This is a college course I took from Madison College a few years ago. These are speaking recognition for when I've given talks at conferences. These are personality attribute surveys, the kind of thing that they do for pre-hire assessment or job fit, right? It's a wide range of different kinds of things. Up here at the top are some of my latest ones. If you're interested in learning a little about blockchain, this is a great course. It takes about 3 hours and you actually build some blockchain pieces. And this is my latest one I earned a few weeks ago on enterprise design thinking through an academy that IBM runs. But I mean, this is kind of how it goes. And then it's easy to share. You know, you've got your LinkedIn options. You've got Twitter and Facebook, a variety of other different options. You can print out a certificate form of this if you like. I'm going to go back to my profile and choose one of these older ones. So this is an expired badge. That's an interesting concept to try and re-engage learners and bring them back to the college and try and keep the college center to their professional development. And this one, when I go to share, for some reason, it's got me signed out on share. Hang on a second. Okay, we'll go back to that. There we go. Oops. And this one, when I go to share, I've got an actual blockchain, a Bitcoin record I can create from this. So you may have heard about blockchain credentials and transcripts on the blockchain. We're kind of sitting squarely in the middle of that and doing some innovation work in partnership with Lumina, in partnership with ACE. We just completed an IBM blockchain accelerator program. And with us and IBM, we're going to be forming this Learning Credentials blockchain initiative that'll be an open consortium where we invite colleges in and help them publish their transcripts on blockchain. So it's all a continuum, right? Individual skills, skills stacked into certificates, certificates stacked into credentials that become, you know, college degrees or professional certifications, et cetera. And that's kind of the vision. If you're a beginner and you want to learn a little bit more, I'm happy to re-engage. I'm going to transition now. I've got a couple more checklists to share. And then we're going to go over to John, who's going to talk about his specific situation at College of the Canyons. So are you back to seeing the PowerPoint checklist? Okay. So we've got some guidelines and experience to share if you're interested in participating in this digital badges for college credit movement. These are some of the lessons we learned with IBM and the groups that it's been engaging in. You begin with the same kind of prior learning assessment as you already do, but it's really reinforced with this collaboration with your industry partners. And then the second idea is this sort of the transition slide over to John. Suggestions for how you might get started if you're just at the beginning points with your college. The lesson we learn consistently is the administrators respond to data and data-backed arguments. So there are some low-hanging fruit areas to start on campus: non-credit professional certificates, the pathways that connect professional certificates to college credit, co-curricular and extracurricular achievements, career readiness skills in the Career Center. And actually, some of you might be familiar with the Santa Barbara City College Career Skills Institute, which is in this category. And the Career Skills Institute badge program and curriculum has now been scaled out to all the other colleges in the South Central College District. I'm sure they'd be willing to share and talk about how to scale that with you as well. And then finally, some emerging soft skills and competency-based initiatives. There are some of these already in the California Community College system, and we're just seeing an explosion on the scene from groups like Innovate and Educate, or other groups that are focused on soft skills development, and they're credentialing the outcomes. So you're putting on what has been an uncredentialed landscape, you're actually documenting the skills that you've developed. So John's going to talk now about the case study at College of the Canyons, and he did the bold thing, and he went straight for the credit curriculum and engaged with the faculty senate and fought those battles. These 6 areas I've identified are areas that can start with maybe a little less direct high bar proof, right? You've got some existing programs that are an easier step. But John, tell us more about what you've done at College of the Canyons, because it's been pretty impressive given the daunting nature of how you need to take these institutional change things on.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Pete, for kicking that off. And I think it's really cool to see that every time I see a presentation from you, there are so many additional layers. I mean, that presentation could be a month later and it's almost a completely different presentation because so much is happening in this space. And so it's really exciting to see that. Good morning, everybody. I hope everyone's doing well. Hope you can all hear me just fine. I'm going to try to do a screen share here. And so give me 1 second to find the right spot. And do you all see that?
Yep.
All
Yep.
right, perfect. So again, as Pete said, you know, we're trying to, at the ground level here, you know, at the college level, figure out how do we take these innovations and put them into play in an existing structure that, as we all know, is well entrenched. There are a number of systems and structures and silos that exist at all of our colleges and at the state and the California Community College system that make it very difficult sometimes to take the rapid rate of change and put it in play. And so we're trying to leverage that here at the college, and I think successfully so. Before I go too far, I want to talk a little bit about the urgency factors. Why is this important to do now, and why is this important to do so quickly? And I think some of these are things that everybody on here has heard of and talked about. Industry demands. We know that industry is demanding newer types of skills that develop from rapid innovation and rapid technology change. And I believe all of us have probably heard from local and national businesses that sometimes the rate at which we can adapt and change to those can't keep up. And so, and especially in the California community colleges, it can take sometimes up to 18 months to develop new curriculum. In 18 months, I'm sure if I handed it back to Pete right now, he would say in 18 months, brand new technologies have already come around. There's new teaching that's required for those technologies, and everyone's moved on. And so it makes it very difficult sometimes for us to adapt, while at the same time respecting the process that's existed in the California community colleges of vetting curriculum development and making sure that faculty have a deep involvement in that process and drive that process, right? So that's a bit of a tension point. Another one is financial aid burden. I was at the South by Southwest Education Conference this week, and I was at a panel presentation from students who were really saying that, you know, the number one skill they need is financial literacy. They're coming out going, okay, somebody's telling me I need to incur thousands and thousands of dollars of debt, and I'm seeing people, brothers and sisters, that are coming out of college and not necessarily landing that job right away. So that's another tension point. The gig economy. I would, if I was in a room with all of you, I'd ask you all to raise your hand, but I'd say, you know, raise your hand if you know somebody who drives for Uber or Lyft, right? All of us probably do. And some of us might do that already on our own too. And so the gig economy, this concept that individuals, especially those who are graduating high school and even, you know, 2-year degrees in college or pursuing college, are doing some of these jobs on the side and starting to realize, yeah, you know, I might have 5 or 6 of these, but I have flexibility. I have independence. And so that's another variable, right, that's creating a certain amount of urgency here. And then we talked already about the innovation rate of change. So here's the issue, right? You've got a bunch of students who are going through college, and we've got this very well-entrenched traditional pathway, and it's an all or nothing approach. So we're telling people, okay, you go to, I went to UC San Diego. So let's say you go to UC San Diego. I need you to do 4 years. I'm not going to give you any credit that's worth anything for those 4 years until you're done. You know, you can earn your units, right? You can build your transcript. It's worth nothing to you until you are done. We're entering a model where that's becoming less and less relevant. And truthfully, if we as institutions are going to be responsive to that, we have to start developing some flexibility quickly. And that's where the urgency comes in. So what are some of the concerns? Now that we know there's this urgency established, what are some of the concerns that we have at the ground level at the colleges that we need to take care of? The first one that I'll talk about has to do with the word badge. And Pete referred to this as well, the fact that badge is sort of coming out of style, and we're starting to use the term digital credentials more. I can't tell you how many conversations I've had with people where, you know, when I would talk about digital badges and the word badge already turned them off. They thought, well, that's just like a sticker. That's something cheesy. That's not something that's going to really be meaningful. Vocabulary matters. And so, you know, one of the big barriers we had to get through at the college is trying to convince people, you know, when we were still using the word badges more often, trying to convince people, hey, this is something meaningful. This is something that's actually important, and industry is starting to recognize these things. So one layer of that conversation is making sure people understand that. Another layer is to talk about the differences between digital credentials and college certificates, and where the overlaps exist. So we'll talk a little bit more about this in a few minutes, but one of the things that that we had to do with is, we had to decide is, what are we going to be issuing badges for? Are we going to be issuing badges for things that already exist, like existing college certificates? Or are we going to be issuing badges for other things, other accomplishments, other skills? So that's one of the concerns that has to be engaged with faculty and with administration and staff as well, is, you know, when do you issue these digital credentials, and what are they going to count for? The other big conversation we had to have at the college initially is, who's allowed to issue them? Early on, when we started to engage, we made a big mistake. I made a big mistake. I thought it would be easier to start having the conversation with administration and staff before having the conversation with faculty. And I was wrong. It turns out more of the resistance has come from administration and staff than it has from faculty. And that was a bit of an eye-opener, and I don't know if that would be the same at every institution. But the reason is process. Administration and staff, we're the ones that do the process, right? We've got the steps, we've got the recipes, we've got the silos, we've got the structure. So all of this, when you're starting to engage in that conversation, who's allowed to issue digital credentials? You're asking questions like, well, who's going to process them? Who's going to give me the extra budget to hire the person who's going to process these credentials? Our admissions and records office doesn't have that staff. We're already overtaxed. Are you going to put extra money in? So these are all considerations that factor in. And you'll see in a few minutes, I'll talk about sort of the order of operations that I would recommend. And I actually recommend putting administration and staff towards the latter part of the process for many of those same reasons. And then the other question that we had to have a conversation about is, how big or small are these credentials? So in a moment, I'll talk about our meeting with the Academic Senate here at the college. And, when folks don't know what digital badges / credentials are, they don't really know necessarily what they count for. So when we began the conversation, there were folks in the room that said, I don't want a badge to just be for a small skill, let's say a learning outcome in a course. We're a college institution. We need to have our badges stand for something bigger. And as the conversation evolved, what we started to get to was, wait a minute, the opposite is actually more true. Let's go back to that 4-year example for UC San Diego, right? Right now, it's an all or nothing proposition. You get your degree or you don't get your degree. If we start to produce value for the process, we're not only going to give students things that are meaningful and valuable to themselves and also perhaps to employers, but also we're going to give students probably more motivation in the process to continue their education. Because when it's an all or nothing proposition, it is real easy sometimes to say, well, I haven't gotten anything yet, and I've got 3 jobs out there. I'm going to bail. I'm going to go do something else. So that's another consideration that came up in the conversation. And faculty in particular were very motivated by the fact that, wait a minute, we can start giving students things that count for something, as long as we have a good process for this, that count for something in their journey along the way, in their pathway, their educational pathway. So it also ties a lot to our educational pathways and guided pathways movements in California too. So another piece of this is branding. As we started talking about who issues badges, who's allowed to issue badges, all of that, we had to make the decision, and one of the early decisions, in terms of saying, if we're going to allow badges to exist in multiple formats, if we're going to say, I want a faculty member to be able to issue a badge and I want the institution to be able to issue badges, we need to be careful and focus on branding. So one of the early things we decided on is, if a badge is equivalent to a college certificate or a degree, then the badge is allowed to carry the district seal. Now, in this case, I used Hogwarts, but so the badge is allowed to use the district seal if that badge is equivalent to an existing certificate or degree. That way, you're not creating anything new, right? You're creating the digital equivalent, the digital proxy of something that already exists. You're not messing with any existing process. So that was one of the very first things we arrived at is, let's make that decision as a group. If it's got the district seal on it, it is consistent with something that already exists. We're not building anything new. Now, if over on the right-hand side, I put just a very generic one, Hogwarts continuing education, right? So we talked about the fact that it's important for departments at a college, let's say the professional development program, continuing ed, maybe community education, contract education, all of these different components, to be able to issue badges and to not prohibit that, right? But to say, if you're going to issue those badges, you can't have the district seal on it. And that's really where we started to draw the line, is to say, this is a district issued badge, or this is a badge issued by a department or a group. Now, we're a single college district, so it obviously can get a little bit more complicated if you're a multi-college district, but you get the idea nonetheless. So we talked a little bit about branding, and we're still working on that. We're still very early in the process of figuring out what that branding is going to look like. But that's a consideration that we've already decided, is that we can separate those two pieces out. So then policy. So when we engaged, what I started to do is to engage a small group of faculty, especially after I realized we had a large meeting with our continuing education committee, which has a mixture of faculty and administrators. And that's where I started to realize that the tension was coming from staff and administration. And it was more about process and who's going to give me the extra budget to hire the people that are needed to take care of this process, right? So that's where I had to recalculate and start to realize, okay, we're going to go about this a different way. So I gathered about 3 or 4 faculty members who indicated some degree of interest in digital badging. And we got together and started talking about what would policy need to look like. If we're going to establish a policy around this, what would it need to look like? Now, in full disclosure, we're still in the process of developing this policy, and I would argue the very early parts of this process. But we did come to a tentative agreement that we're still in a pilot phase. So we're issuing badges currently, but we're doing so in sort of a pilot mode while the policy gets established for the college. So that was a very good sort of tentative agreement, if you will, in working with our academic senate. So, you know, it's important that one of the things that was important and argued by our academic senate was if a badge is going to touch on existing curriculum. So if there's existing credit or non-credit curriculum at the college that that a badge would be issued from. So let's say it's a badge for completion of a course or a badge for, again, a certain set of skills within a course, but it touches on something that's already in the purview of the academic senate, that the academic senate wants to establish a process for at least consent or review of these badges as they come about. And that's reasonable because that's consistent with existing curriculum. The point that I and others in the room made is we don't want that process to become cumbersome for the badges that exist outside of that sphere. So let's say, for example, our college professional development program wants to issue a badge. We don't want that issuance of that badge that, again, does not have the district seal on it, that's separate from the badges that are issued by the district as a whole. We don't want that badge to have to go through the academic senate process or go through any kind of separate approval. And that seemed reasonable to the group, and that's where we're headed in terms of the trajectory of our policy. And the proxy for this, and the easiest sort of equivalent to think about is, and this is what I told folks in the room, if you have right now a student, let's say a student receives a certificate of completion in non-credit for a particular program. That certificate has, again, the district seal on it. It's a, you know, looks like a diploma, right? It's the same sort of thing. That does not prohibit me in my office on my printer from printing out a certificate that says, congratulations for attending this one-day community education class. There's no guideline that says I cannot do that. And this is really the digital equivalent of that same space, right? We don't want to get in the business of saying, if somebody's going to issue a badge, it must be exactly equivalent to an existing certificate program or whatever. That's a dangerous road to go down, because the strength of digital credentials is their flexibility, their ability to be issued in different sizes. If you go into do what Pete did and you go into Twitter and you look at all of the digital certifications that have been issued, you'll see a variety of different sizes, not in terms of the logo size, but size of accomplishment of those badges. Sometimes they're for very small achievements. Sometimes it's for the completion of a very long process. And that's one of the strengths that really is to be maintained in this process of establishing this at a college. So that's where we began the process in terms of separating those things out. In terms of honoring and supporting external digital credentials, we know that industry issues credentials and has done so for a long time, and increasingly is creating digital equivalents of those credentials. So we are engaging in conversations locally about saying, okay, well, we know that in a particular certificate program, let's say at the college, we know that there might be students may be able to go and obtain an external certification, external certification for associated with that. And so we're trying to make sure that our existing curriculum can line up and point to that, so that we can honor and try to be inclusive of those types of credentials. One perfect example is what Steve's been doing for a long time with the business, why can't I think?
Business information worker?
Business information worker. I couldn't think of the middle word. I was the new business worker. The business information worker program, which has been portable to all of the California community colleges. And so that's sort of a perfect example of an outcome that is external to a specific college, but you can work on trying to tie your local college curriculum to. And then further, I would say, when we talked a little bit about this, being able to issue digital credentials through other entities at the college, say community education, contract ed, professional development, and having a process by which that's allowed to happen. And what we're going to be doing at COC, at College of the Canyons, is we're going to be looking at our public information office to add to their communications guide specific guidelines for the use of design of badges or design of digital credentials. So if a digital credential is designed, here are the guidelines for that design if it's going to be district issued, and here are the guidelines that you need to make sure you stick to if you are issuing your own badge or your own digital certification. So last but not least, the recipe. And this is what I wanted to present as sort of a broad-based recommendation for other colleges who are looking or who are considering doing this. The first step, I think, that makes this work is professional development. Engage your faculty, engage your college community in an understanding of what digital credentials really are. And so, because you'll find that a large percentage of them just don't know. In fact, there's probably a good percentage of folks on this webinar right now that don't have a complete understanding of what digital certifications and badges are. And so it's important to have that professional development and engage in that conversation at your institution. So make sure they get an understanding of what they are, but don't talk over the implementation details at that point. You'll scare people. I've already done it. I already know. Don't go there. Just talk about what they are, introduce what they are, introduce their power, and then introduce the benefit to the student. Focus on the student and the benefit that the student carries on that. Focus less on industry, focus on the student. That conversation will go far. The second step is identifying the key faculty stakeholders, supporters, and leaders. So again, this is what I did that worked after what I did that did not work. So I started to gather the 3 or 4 people that I knew would help me champion this. I, as an administrator, am not the one to champion this at all. So I needed them to carry the torch here. And so I found them, and they started getting involved in some of that professional development and leading that, but more importantly, started having conversations with academic senate leadership. And so they actually helped me engage in those conversations to the point where the Senate decided to call a separate, not a Senate meeting, but a separate meeting of some of the Senate leadership where we could actually engage in some policy conversations. And that's where we had our first meeting. So that leads to item number 3, engage with the academic senate to discuss policy. There should be a policy subcommittee. So, engaging particularly with those folks to design and construct a policy, or at least some of the early ingredients of a policy that can work. Then I would say simultaneous to that or shortly thereafter, reach some sort of agreement to be able to pilot a small digital credential program. It's important because that's where item number 5 comes in. You're going to open the eyes and wake people up in terms of the importance to scramble and develop process, but you want to do it after there's already movement. If you start to engage in number 5, like I did, and you don't already have movement, then everybody's going to try to stop it. And it's not unique to College of the Canyons. It probably is at every college. Fear will always stop people. So item number 5 we'll put the brakes on things if you don't have some momentum already. So I strongly encourage engaging in a pilot. It can be very small. We're doing our pilot through our continuing education program, and we're trying to keep it very small in scope. And we're making sure that our office has the staffing to provide coverage for badge issuance and all of those sorts of things. Well, in that process now, in fact, just today, I got a meeting request from some other administrators at the college who want to talk about establishing a process for this because they're starting to see it become bigger. But now it's already moving. So that is not going to, instead of the meeting being, how can we stop this? The meeting is, how can we develop a process for it? So I wanted to make sure I could talk through some of these experiences we've had at our college so that you could get a sense of this recipe. What are the steps that I think can really make it work most effectively? And I'd be happy, I think we have about 10 minutes for questions. I'm happy to answer any questions that folks have, and I'll also be on the chat as well to respond.
John, I'd like to ask you a question. By the way, thank you for being so blunt about the the problem and the learning experiences. I think anybody who's worked with implementing programs on college campuses knows their unique college. Across the board, from my perspective, I see these kind of issues all the time. Finding a champion early on, and never underestimate faculty. They really have the hearts and minds of the student at heart, and as long as you lead with that, you're in pretty good shape. That's an excellent learning experience to share. But I did want to ask you one question. Have you got any ballpark feel for what's the total cost of ownership here? When I say total cost of ownership, I mean, budget, and if so, how are you finding the money for it? And also in terms of people, I mean, how many people, how many hours? I mean, is this a big thing, little thing? Is it a full-time job for somebody? So what do you see from that standpoint?
It's big. It's big. It takes time to manage the badge issuance process, because it's an adjunct. It's an add-on to certificate printing, and arguably, if you're issuing badges for a larger number of things, not just for certificates, but also issuing badges for skills and things like that, you have to make several decisions, which we're still in the process of trying to decide. You probably need at least a full-time person in your admissions and records office to be able to handle the processing of just badge issuance for certificates. Maybe not full-time, maybe 72.5%, somewhere around there, but you need a lot of hours. That's, especially if you're broadening this to credit and non-credit, that's a big population. In addition, for all of the other departments that want to issue badges, those departments will need some support staff, at least some hourly staff, to support this. So now, all that said, if you look at the all of the points that I brought up in the urgency at the beginning, the fact that we know this has to happen, we know that we have to find a way to be more responsive, the cost is low when you look at that, because you're talking about maybe $70,000 commitment on the college's part, to support in admissions and records for, say, a full-time staff member, plus some hourly support at other departments. But again, the consequence is too big to ignore. And the consequence is, if you don't do this, and we don't find more flexible ways to be responsive, that really, especially with the changing student population and the changing needs of the student and the changing needs of employers, that's going to be a big challenge.
Well, I particularly like the point you made about how this supports our guided pathways strategy.
Yes.
It keeps the students retained and engaged, and it shows them something for what they're getting. That had never really occurred to me before. So it's a wonderful context that you established for that.
And I'll add one other thing real quick. I'm working on I'm in a doctoral program right now, and I'm working on my dissertation topic having to do with digital badge issuing and its connection to motivation. And that's where sort of that piece has really come in with the connection to guided pathways. This is the motivating key to keep students on their path and to keep them realizing that they have some currency. They're getting something out of what they're learning rather than the intangibles. And so I think that's a critically important piece.
Now, on the college operations side, can you take your long view of history here and ask yourself, is this just part of the automation of the college process? I mean, are we going to see this eventually replace transcripts and everything else?
If I had to guess, I don't know. I'll tell you where this gets complicated. As with anything, I reflect back on the early days of online education. When online education first started at the colleges, it was the wild, wild west. There weren't a lot of guidelines. There weren't a lot of policies until people realized it was big. And I think that's what's going to happen here. I think ultimately, we will begin. In fact, that was one of the concerns of some of the faculty at our college. Well, are we going to establish something, and is the state going to come and say we've got to undo it and do it a different way? And my counter argument to that was, that's exactly the reason we need to get on establishing right now, because we can help develop that model for what the state would employ in this process. So do I think that these digital credentials will replace certificates? No, I think probably certificates and degrees will continue to exist for as long as we can imagine, because they serve a purpose. The problem is we have now additional purposes that need to be served, and I think this is where the digital credentials really come in.
Okay, I'd like to turn it over now to anybody who has a question in the audience. We've had at least one request that Pete reshare a slide or two. So Pete, if you'd like to go ahead and put that up. Then anybody else who'd like to type in a question or go ahead and speak up. I believe we're unmuted.
So Steve, I've shared the checklist for college credit, 10 basic steps. I also have someone else, Allison asked for examples from other colleges. You can go to the youracclaim.com site and use the search box and the term college, and you can pull up a list of badge providers who have college in their title. Certainly not foolproof. It's not at all an inclusive list, but it'll give you a way to do some scanning. And actually, I can show you what you can get to from there. Let's see. Okay. You'll come to pages like this one for Santa Barbara City College. And you can see their catalog of badges. Santa Barbara City College also has its own landing page and a really effective marketing site. And if you're interested in seeing that, you can hit me up, or Steve knows where that is as well. This is Madison College in Wisconsin, and they're notable for both non-credit as well as credit badge tracks. These medical assistant tracks are for credit, and several of the other ones are non-credit. Gateway Technical College in Wisconsin has a variety of certificates. I believe they're rolling out some for credit programs now too. And then lastly, NWCA is an initiative started by Condensed Curriculum International, which is a group kind of like Ed2Go. They've got curriculum in a can, and you plug it in and turn it on and add your own faculty. But what they've done with their curriculum is they've got outcomes assessments administered by National Workforce Career Association. And you can take those outcomes assessments and earn credentials that then become job credentials. And the CCI curricula is used in both for credit and non-credit programs. Now, the daunting thing about this NWCA program is there are over 2,000 different courses represented here. So if I go to the next, NWCA might be a good example of what you could do if you were to put a badge on every course in the college curriculum. So if you're looking for something, like I say, super over the top, NWCA is what you want. But in terms of starting off with the low-hanging fruit, you got a great example at Santa Barbara City College. You got another great example at College of the Canyons.
And I'd like to answer, I believe, it's Charlotte's question on the chat line. Santa Barbara City College, they use a flipped classroom model with lynda.com classes that the student watches at home, and they come in class, and the testing and that sort of thing goes along with that as the basis for curriculum. So it's a unique thing that they did from a continuing ed kind of approach.
And can I add real quick as well, we've, at College of the Canyons, we adopted what Santa Barbara City College has done with their Career Skills Institute. We did something a little different. We are offering some of those classes fully online. And we've had tremendous success in terms of offering those fully online, both in terms of number of students enrolling, industry partners literally drooling at the opportunity to get their students into those classes, especially knowing that the class times for some of the face-to-face offerings conflict with their work schedules. So this has been a real win for us to be able to try to grow this online. There are challenges in the California community colleges offering non-credit courses online, don't get me wrong, but I think it's been worth that challenge.
And I would say, in response to the person asking about LinkedIn Learning, the SBCC curriculum is powered by LinkedIn Learning as the content. So it's a flipped classroom model. You go take the LinkedIn Learning course, you complete that, and then you do a project. And the project is facilitated by Santa Barbara City College faculty who assess your project and then determine if you're credit worthy. And if you're credit worthy, then you earn the badge.
Well, we're coming up on the 11 o'clock hour right here, and I want to thank our presenters, Pete Janzow and John Bekovich, for very insightful presentations on badges and how to do it in the community college space. And certainly everybody who's here, we had pretty good, if I judge retention rate, we did pretty good. We retained out of 33 people, we still have 27 still at the end. Thank you very much for being here. I hope you all can hear me applauding you. This is the beginning of every weekly series that we're going to have. Next Friday, we're going to be focusing on the Business Information Worker Program. And during next week's webinar, our guest presenter will be CIS instructor Pablo Romero from the College of the Desert, who will share how he's taken their Business Information Worker Program to a new level. He's helped create 3 new cross-disciplinary business information specialist certificates, a legal specialist, a market specialist, and a medical specialist, and has even secured internships for students in the medical specialist program. So as each week goes on, we'll get another dimension of information communications technologies. All of these webinars are recorded and they will be stored on our website. We're even looking for a technique to edit them down to a more manageable. Although everything today, I don't know what I edit out of today. Today was solid gold. So thank you all very much. And if anybody wants to hang on the Zoom thing and continue to ask questions, whatever after this, we'll do that fine. But we'll end the recording now. And thank you very much.